and we're live. So yesterday a thought came to me, not necessarily a thought, but kind of like a challenge, right? Because we live in a conflicted world. I mean, there are some places that are safe that don't have conflict, like the country where I live, or the country where some other people live. But then you get the Syria, and then you get the Yemen, and then you get the Middle East, and there's just a lot of conflict. Now, when it comes to human compassion, it's hard to just ignore that sometimes little kids are shot, that they are collateral, basically. It's pretty hard. And I'll go first, like in the Middle East, right? In the Middle East, I don't know whether they have been negotiations to sort of create a treaty between the groups that are fighting, and this is basically conflict. This is conflict management, conflict avoidance, and so forth. Right? It's about how can you stop conflict, right? And we have a lot of examples. For example, in our country, in Namibia, we had a lot of conflict, and there was an armed struggle. But the thing that caused the ceasefire in the end, right, was because of the pressure that South Africa was getting. Of course, the fall of the wall as well. The communists lost power and all of that. But it was also about South Africa being under pressure to the point where they just had to give in, right? And by many, this is viewed as the greatest history in the world because, let's be honest, the South African apartheid regime was pretty damn well equipped. They were powerful. They were the most powerful nation on the continent at that time. So the only way that they were able to sort of put pressure on them, it wasn't just the sanctions. It wasn't just a war being waged by Namibians. It was also the people that lived in South Africa. There were lots of so-called white people who defected and helped the rebels, the ones that were outcast from society because they opposed the South African regime. Now, this is another example of conflict resolution. But in our modern era, it's more complicated. And honestly, I think it's more complicated because there isn't dialogue. Like if you want to resolve a problem, and you have to send in your best team, but most of the time those teams cannot speak the language of the natives of that country. Everybody thinks you go to war, you strike the places of power, and everything falls apart, and eventually the dictators or the oppressors or whatever are annihilated. But I don't think that in modern Africa this should be the approach. I think the approach to tackle conflict in Africa, not in Africa, in the world, right, is to follow the trails of the people selling weapons. And this also brings about conflict, because most of the people selling weapons are from those other countries that supposedly want to stop the conflict. But if we really want to become a connected world step by step, then we have to start looking at such things. Like, guerrillas won't be able to fight if they don't have any ammunition, if they don't have any guns. So the attack should be on the weapons, where the weapons are manufactured, shipped, or whatever. Take away their firing power. Take away their firing power, and then protect the communities. Put up a front around the communities while you disarm the so-called terrorists or whatever, so that they won't be able to intimidate the people that would otherwise not be able to defend themselves. And it's very important that people feel safe, because the safer they feel, the more they will be able to fight back. So when it comes to conflict, most people say there's a lot of conflict because it's driven by religion, and because they have all of these laws, laws that undermine women, and most of that stuff doesn't really speak on the aggression, right? Conflict resolution is something that I want to ponder a lot. It's something I want to think about a lot, because it's been done a lot of times in our world history, right? It's been done aggressively, it's been done through espionage and all sorts of things. But if you can sort of infiltrate those places and give the people information that will empower them, right, then you won't really they won't have the support of the people, which would be a big win. By cutting their weapon supplies, they won't have weapons anymore, which will be a big win. And by protecting the civilians, this would also be a big win. Because going out and killing all of these guys, it isn't really the solution, because in the end there will always be retribution. So the best way to solve conflict is to be smart, to use very effective non-violent strategies. Right? And I don't know why a lot of big countries aren't, going into overdrive on this. Right? It goes to the point where it's sort of like complements the conspiracies that certain countries actually like the fact that there is war in those communities. Because one thing I have noticed is that information, be it in a package of education or not, is very powerful. If kids aren't allowed to go to school, then have a group that create curriculums that can be given to the people so that they can be homeschooled, as well as the same thing for the adults, because the more they know, the more they are empowered, and the more they see just how much oppression they have to live with day by day. So the negotiations that go on in the world don't take account of the ongoing wars where kids who lose their parents, who are traumatized, grow up, and what do? They seek retribution because they don't have guidance. And military forces should also have guidance counselors, trauma counselors. Because when your enemy is your friend, you're better off. That is the best way to look at it, the best way to negotiate. And I'm saying this because I've noticed that a lot of times, like in Sudan, I was told in Sudan there were a bunch of guerrillas who wanted to go to one of the markets where the people were to loot, and they faced oppression from the people, right? But the people didn't have guns and so forth, so eventually they were overpowered. And then the UN came in later, secretly of course, and when the rebels came back again, they were confronted not only by the UN who had weapons, but by the people who also had weapons to defend themselves. And there was a lot of gunfire, a lot of guerrillas were killed, and the one thing that comes up from that, right, is that we can't go there anymore. We can't do that anymore. There is a sense of trauma that the guerrillas got from that incident, because they lost now people that they were close to as well, and they noticed that their intimidation tactics, which is one of the strongest tools that these people use, wasn't going to work anymore. So they had a choice. Should they go out and be slaughtered, or should they go away? And the concept of not negotiating with terrorists, I don't agree with it. When negotiations take place, it's usually with the high-ranking people. Those people don't care about the lives that they send out there to die. Negotiations should be with the fighters. The why are you doing this? The alternatives that they can be given. Because now in Sudan, a lot of child soldiers are putting down their guns. And this effort came through dialogue. Because finally, there were people that believed in them. Let's not forget that these people are human too. The media paints animals, what. No, they are misguided. They are misguided. Their governments are corrupt. They don't get to, they don't get opportunities. They don't get development. And then they become frustrated. After they get frustrated, they decide they will take things by force. And the stronger they get, the more confidence they get. But it all starts with a failure in government. Because that's what security is for. You have to secure your country in a manner that you know everything going on in your country. And when there is a potential for an uprising, there should be intervention before it goes anywhere. And the people that should be negotiated with, the leaders, it shouldn't always be the leaders. The leaders are hard-headed, they don't think, because they have all those troops behind them, they have this fake sense of pride. But if there is dialogue with the people that put their lives on the line, right? Dialogue where they are not implicated and their forces turn against them. Kill them from the inside without even using weapons. I believe in a world one day where we won't have conflict, like war and stuff. But that means we have to start working hard already, and we have to start working hard now. The situation in Syria is not being shown for how gruesome it is. For example, like what happens to the survivors of war. That story isn't being told. The psychological impact it has on the kids is not being told. There is no shame being allocated to the instigators. I seriously hope the UN, the AU, even the EU and the United States of America start to look at this, because it's important not only out of the goodness of their hearts. No, it's important because as a world, as we become more connected, the sufferings of others will eventually become ours. So, empathy. We have to be empathetic. Please. I mean, Obama will be out of office soon. So, show your strength. You're the boss after all, man.